I'm Aria Moore, 29 years old, and 6 months ago the most humiliating moment of my life happened. I was standing in the cereal aisle of Target when my ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend walked up to me and called me a broke loser in front of everyone. But what she did 3 weeks later was even worse. If you've ever felt like the universe was playing some cruel joke on you, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this type of cosmic irony. Looking back now, I can see how everything started falling into place like dominoes, but at the time I thought my life was just one random disaster after another. The story really begins 5 years ago when I met Derek at a coffee shop downtown. I was rushing to a job interview, my portfolio tucked under one arm and my phone pressed against my ear as I tried to navigate through the morning crowd. I wasn't paying attention and crashed straight into this guy carrying 2 large coffees. The impact sent both cups flying, dousing us both in what smelled like vanilla latte and espresso. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I gasped, watching the brown liquid spreading across his white button-down shirt. But instead of being angry, he started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but genuine, infectious laughter that made other customers turn to look at us. "Well," he said, pulling his soaked shirt away from his chest, "I guess I'm not making it to my presentation looking professional today." His eyes were this warm brown color like melted chocolate, and when he smiled, tiny lines appeared at the corners. He had this easy confidence about him, the kind that made you feel instantly comfortable. "Let me buy you new coffee," I insisted, checking my watch. I was already running late, but I couldn't just leave him standing there dripping. "Only if you let me buy you breakfast to make up for making you late," he countered, nodding toward my portfolio. "Job interview?" That breakfast turned into lunch, which turned into dinner plans for the weekend. Derek was a marketing manager at a tech startup 3 years older than me, with this incredible ability to make even the most mundane stories sound fascinating. He remembered details about conversations we'd had weeks earlier, always asking follow-up questions about my work as a freelance graphic designer. When I mentioned I was nervous about a client presentation, he'd text me good luck messages. When I landed a big contract, he'd show up at my apartment with my favorite Thai food to celebrate. The early days felt like living in a romantic comedy. He'd leave little post-it notes on my bathroom mirror with inside jokes or sweet messages. I'd hide his favorite protein bars in his gym bag with silly drawings on the wrappers. We had this running competition about who could find the weirdest vintage item at thrift stores. He once brought me a ceramic owl that we named Gerald and kept on my kitchen windowsill. Saturday mornings meant sleeping in late, then walking to the farmer's market for fresh coffee and pastries. He'd always insist on carrying my bags, even though I told him I was perfectly capable. Those first 3 years were like building something beautiful and sturdy together. My freelance business was growing steadily, and Derek got promoted twice at his company. We moved in together after year 2, finding this perfect little 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and a tiny balcony where we grew herbs. I converted the second bedroom into my home office, and Derek would bring me tea when I was working late, massaging my shoulders when I got tense over difficult projects. We had our rhythms and rituals. Tuesday nights were for trying new recipes, usually disasters that ended with us ordering pizza and laughing at our culinary failures. Friday evenings meant wine and whatever series we were binge-watching. Derek introduced me to sci-fi shows I'd never considered watching, while I got him hooked on true crime documentaries. We'd pause episodes to debate theories or argue about whether the protagonist was making smart decisions. Our friends started treating us like a unit. Derek and Aria became one word in group conversations. We were the couple people came to for relationship advice, the ones who hosted game nights and dinner parties. I loved watching Derek interact with my friends. He remembered their birthdays, asked about their jobs, made everyone feel included in conversations. My best friend Maya used to joke that I'd won the boyfriend lottery. By year 4, we were talking about marriage and kids like they were inevitable. Wonderful certainties just waiting for the right timing. Derek wanted to get promoted to senior manager first, while I hoped to save enough money to transition from freelance to starting my own design agency. We looked at engagement rings online, debated destination wedding versus something local, argued about baby names just for fun. I felt so secure in our future together that I started making 5- and 10-year plans that included him without question. The golden period, if I had to name it, was probably year 4 into year 5. Derek's promotion came through with a substantial raise, and my client base had grown to the point where I was turning down projects. We upgraded to a beautiful 1-bedroom loft in the Arts District, with exposed brick walls and massive windows that flooded my workspace with natural light. Our morning routine became this choreographed dance. He'd start the coffee while I showered, then I'd make eggs while he got dressed. We'd eat breakfast standing at the kitchen island, talking about our days ahead, his hand always finding mine across the marble countertop. I remember feeling this deep contentment during that time, like all the pieces of my life had finally clicked into place. I had work I loved, a man who cherished me, friends who felt like family, and this growing confidence that I could handle whatever challenges came my way. Derek would come home from work and find me designing at my desk, and he'd wrap his arms around me from behind, kissing the top of my head while asking about my projects. Those moments felt like pure happiness, so simple and easy that I sometimes wondered if I was taking them for granted. But even during the best times, there were tiny cracks I chose not to see. Derek had this way of making decisions for both of us without asking first, booking weekend trips, making dinner reservations, buying expensive items for our apartment. When I brought it up, he'd always say he was just trying to take care of me, to surprise me, to make life easier. "I love spoiling you," he'd say, and it felt ungrateful to complain about being spoiled. He also had this habit of checking his phone constantly, even during our date nights. When I asked about it, he'd say it was work stress, that his boss expected quick responses to emails. The explanations always made sense, so I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling that something was off. The beginning of the end started on a Thursday evening in October. I was finishing up a logo design for a local bakery when Derek came home later than usual, his energy different somehow. Instead of his usual enthusiastic greeting and kiss, he just called out a quick "Hey babe" before heading straight to the shower. At dinner, he seemed distracted, checking his phone between bites and giving short answers to my questions about his day. When I asked if everything was okay, he snapped that he was just tired and stressed about a big project deadline. But something in his tone felt defensive in a way that was new and unsettling. I'm Aria Moore, and what happened next would change everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and my own worth. The man I'd built my entire future around was about to teach me the hardest lesson of my life, but not in the way either of us expected. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday in November. I woke up to the smell of Derek's cologne lingering on his pillow and the sound of rain pattering against our bedroom windows. He'd already left for an early meeting, but there was a coffee waiting for me in the machine with a note that said, "Busy day ahead, talk tonight, love you." At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I realize it was guilt. I spent the morning working on designs for a nonprofit's annual gala, the kind of project that felt meaningful beyond just paying bills. The client had given me complete creative freedom, and I was in that flow state where hours passed without me noticing. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." No explanation, no apology, just a statement. This had been happening more frequently over the past month, but I trusted him completely. Derek had always been responsible and dedicated to his career. My family background made it easy for me to rationalize his behavior. Growing up as the middle child between my perfectionist older sister Carmen and my charming younger brother Jake, I'd learned early that love meant accommodating other people's needs before your own. My parents, Linda and Robert Moore, ran their relationship like a business partnership where emotions were inconvenient obstacles to efficiency. They loved us, but in this practical, conditional way that required us to be convenient and successful to earn their approval. Carmen, now 32 and a corporate lawyer, had always been the golden child who never put a foot wrong. She made partner at her firm before 30, married another lawyer who checked all the right boxes, and bought a house in the suburbs with a perfectly manicured lawn. My parents couldn't stop talking about her achievements, how proud they were that she'd made something of herself. Jake, 26 and working in sales, had charm and humor that made everyone adore him despite his tendency to bounce between jobs and relationships. He could make our parents laugh and forget his latest irresponsible decision within minutes. Wadded Modiabs, well, I fell somewhere in the middle. This dynamic taught me that maintaining peace was my job, that questioning people's treatment of me was selfish, and that if I just tried hard enough to be understanding and accommodating, I could earn the love and security I craved. My support system outside of Derek and my family consisted of Maya, my best friend since college, who worked as a pediatric nurse and had this incredible ability to see through people's bullshit immediately. There was also James, my business mentor, who'd helped me transition from struggling freelancer to successful designer, and Sarah and Tom, a couple we'd befriended who always made me feel valued and heard. These relationships showed me what genuine care looked like. People who remembered what mattered to me, who celebrated my successes without comparison, who offered support without making me feel like a burden. The crisis hit on a Wednesday evening when I was least prepared for it. I'd been working on a complex website redesign all day, my neck stiff from hunching over my computer, when my phone rang around 7 p.m. Derek's name appeared on the screen, which surprised me since he usually just texted when running late. "Hey," his voice sounded strained, formal. "I need to talk to you about something." "Sure," I said, saving my work and stretching. "What's up? Are you on your way home?" There was a long pause that made my stomach tighten. "Actually, no. I'm not coming home tonight, or, well, I need some space to figure things out. The words hit me like cold water. Figure what out? Derek, what are you talking about? Us, he said simply. I need space to figure out us. I felt the room spinning slightly. I don't understand. What happened? Did I do something wrong? It's not about you doing something wrong, he said, and I could hear traffic in the background, which meant he was outside somewhere instead of at the office like I'd assumed. I've been feeling trapped lately, like we rushed into this serious relationship thing too fast. Too fast? My voice cracked. Derek, we've been together for 5 years. We live together. We've been talking about marriage. I know, and that's part of the problem. I feel like I never got to experience my 20s properly. You know, I went straight from college to career to serious relationship, and I never had time to figure out who I am on my own. This felt like a conversation happening in a foreign language. The Derek I knew loved our stability, our plans, our shared future. He'd been the one pushing for us to move in together, to talk about engagement timelines, to start looking at houses in family-friendly neighborhoods. Where is this coming from? I asked, sinking onto our couch. We were fine yesterday. We were happy. I've been thinking about this for a while, he admitted. I just didn't know how to bring it up without hurting you. The fact that he'd been planning this conversation without telling me felt like a betrayal in itself. So what are you saying exactly? Are you breaking up with me? I'm saying I need space, time to think. Maybe we should take a break and see how we feel in a few months. The clinical way he delivered this news made it worse somehow. No emotion, no acknowledgement of how devastating this was for me, just practical logistics delivered like a business decision. A few months. Derek, this is our life we're talking about. Our home, our future. I know it's hard, he said, but his tone suggested he didn't actually know anything about how hard it was. I'm going to stay with Marcus for a while. I'll come by this weekend to get some clothes and things. Marcus was his coworker, a guy I'd never particularly liked because he talked about women like they were interchangeable and always seemed to be encouraging Derek to go out for drinks instead of coming home to me. The idea of Derek staying there, probably getting advice about how liberating it felt to be single again, made me nauseous. Don't I get a say in this? I asked, tears starting to blur my vision. Don't we get to talk about whatever problems you're having before you just decide to blow up our entire relationship? I've made up my mind, he said firmly. I'm sorry, Arya, I really am, but this is what I need to do. After he hung up, I sat in our living room surrounded by all the evidence of our shared life, photos from trips we'd taken, books we'd bought together, the ceramic owl Gerald still perched on the windowsill, and felt completely lost. My first instinct was to call my family, to seek comfort and support from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I needed someone to tell me this was going to be okay, that I was worthy of love, that Derek's sudden decision wasn't a reflection of my value as a person. I dialed my mom's number with shaking hands, barely able to speak through my tears. Mom? I managed when she answered. Arya? What's wrong? You sound terrible. Derek and he just broke up with me. Well, he says he wants space, but it feels like a breakup. I don't know what to do. There was a pause. Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that. That must be very difficult. Her tone was sympathetic but distant, like she was talking to an acquaintance rather than her daughter. I could hear the television in the background and realized she hadn't turned it off to focus on our conversation. I just don't understand what happened, I continued. Everything was fine, and then suddenly he says he feels trapped and needs to figure himself out. 5 years, Mom. We've been together for 5 years. Well, she said carefully, sometimes these things just run their course. Maybe it's for the best if he wasn't feeling committed. The words hit me like a slap. For the best? Mom, I'm devastated. I thought we were going to get married. I thought he was the one. I know you're upset right now, she said, but you're still young. You have time to find someone else who's more serious about settling down. And honestly, Derek always seemed a little, I don't know, flighty isn't the right word, but maybe this is showing you his true character. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Derek had always been polite and charming around my family. My parents had seemed to approve of him, had included him in family gatherings and holiday celebrations. Now my mother was suggesting she'd had doubts all along, but had never mentioned them. I can't talk about this right now, I said, feeling more alone than before I'd called. Of course, honey, just try to get some rest. Things will look clearer in the morning. But things didn't look clearer in the morning, or the morning after that. I spent the rest of the week in a fog of grief and confusion, barely able to work, surviving on coffee and whatever food Maya brought when she checked on me. The apartment felt enormous and empty without Derek's presence, every familiar object now a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Derek came by that Saturday to collect his things, just as he'd promised. Watching him pack clothes and personal items into boxes was surreal. This person I'd shared my most intimate thoughts and dreams with was now a polite stranger asking if he could take the coffee maker, since he'd been the one to buy it. He seemed calm, almost relieved, which made me feel even worse about my own emotional devastation. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked as he taped up the last box. He looked uncomfortable for the first time since arriving. "It's not about that. That's not an answer." "No," he said finally, "I'm not seeing anyone else." But something in his eyes told me that wasn't the complete truth. Maybe he wasn't technically seeing someone else yet, but there was probably someone he was interested in, someone who represented the freedom and excitement he felt he was missing with me. As I watched him load his car with pieces of our life together, I felt like I was mourning not just the relationship we'd had, but the future we'd planned, the wedding we'd never have, the house we'd never buy, the children we'd never raise. It felt like a death, but one where the person was still alive and had simply chosen to stop loving you. That night, alone in our bed that now felt too big and cold, I realized that my family's lukewarm response to my crisis had been almost as painful as Derek's abandonment itself. When I needed support the most, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had treated my heartbreak like an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a trauma requiring comfort and care. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning of learning who really showed up when my life fell apart and who revealed their true priorities when supporting me became even slightly difficult. 3 days after Derek moved out, my sister Carmen called me during her lunch break. I could hear the busy sounds of downtown traffic in the background as she walked between meetings. "Mom told me about Derek," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry things didn't work out." The clinical way she addressed my heartbreak felt familiar. This was how our family handled emotional situations, by acknowledging them briefly and then moving on to practical matters. "Thanks," I said, though her sympathy felt hollow. "Have you thought about what you're going to do about the apartment? I assume the lease is in both your names." Trust Carmen to immediately focus on logistics rather than feelings. "Actually, it's just in my name. Derek moved in with me when his lease was up, so at least I don't have to worry about that." "Well, that's good. Can you afford it on your own?" The question stung because it implied doubt about my financial stability. "I can manage it. My business has been doing well." "Right, your design thing," she said dismissively. "Maybe this is a good time to think about getting a more stable job though. Freelancing is so unpredictable, and now you don't have Derek's income as backup." I felt my jaw clench. Carmen had never understood or respected my career choice, always treating my successful design business like a hobby I'd eventually outgrow when I got serious about my future. "My design thing pays my bills and gives me the freedom to work on projects I care about," I said sharply. "I'm just saying that maybe some stability would be good for you right now. My firm is always looking for good administrative support and the benefits are excellent. I could put in a word for you." The offer felt like an insult. I had a master's degree in design and had built a thriving business from nothing, but my older sister saw me as someone who needed rescue through an entry-level office job. "I don't need a job, Carmen. I need emotional support from my family." "Of course," she said, but I could hear her checking her phone while we talked. "I'm here for you. It's just that sometimes practical solutions help more than dwelling on feelings." That conversation set the tone for how my family handled my crisis. They acknowledged that it was difficult, offered surface-level sympathy, and then immediately tried to steer me toward practical solutions that had nothing to do with what I actually needed. My brother Jake called a few days later with a similar approach. "Hey sis," he said, his usual cheerful tone slightly dampened. "Heard about Derek. That sucks." "What a yeah. It really does. Want me to beat him up?" he joked, which might have made me laugh under different circumstances. "I just want to understand what happened," I said. Everything seemed fine, and then suddenly he says he feels trapped and needs space. "Maybe he's going through something," Jake suggested. "You know how guys can be with commitment stuff. He might come around." What a yeah. This false hope was almost worse than Carmen's dismissal. "I don't think he's coming around, Jake. He moved out. He took his coffee maker." "The coffee maker's not a good sign," he agreed. "But seriously, you're better off without someone who can't appreciate what he has. You're amazing, Arya. Any guy would be lucky to have you." Jake's words were kind, but they felt like empty platitudes rather than genuine understanding of my pain. He was trying to cheer me up rather than acknowledge how devastated I actually was. The real test of my family's support came 2 weeks later when I had my first major professional crisis since Derek left. A client I'd been working with for 6 months suddenly decided they hated the logo design I'd created and demanded a full refund, claiming I hadn't followed their vision despite the dozens of revision rounds we'd gone through. The dispute was escalating toward legal action, and I was facing the loss of a significant amount of money I'd already counted on for my monthly expenses. I called my dad this time, hoping his business background might make him more understanding of professional stress. "That sounds really frustrating," he said when I explained the situation.
It's more than frustrating, Dad. This client is trying to get months of work for free, and if word gets around that I'm difficult to work with, it could damage my reputation.
Have you considered just giving them the refund to avoid the hassle? I felt my blood pressure spike. Dad, that's thousands of dollars of work. Would you just give away thousands of dollars of your labor if a customer decided they didn't like the results after approving everything along the way? Well, no, but my situation is different. I have an established business with steady income. The implication that my business wasn't real or established hit me hard. I'd been successfully freelancing for 5 years and had built a solid client base, but my family still treated my career like an experiment that might fail at any moment. My business is established too, I said firmly. I have regular clients, consistent income, and a growing reputation. This one bad client doesn't change that. I'm not trying to minimize your work, he said, though that's exactly what he was doing. I just think sometimes it's better to cut your losses and move on rather than getting into drawn-out conflicts. But the conversation that really opened my eyes to how my family saw me happened 3 weeks after Derek left. I was having dinner with my parents at their house, something that had been a monthly tradition for years. The dining room felt the same as always. Mom's good china, fresh flowers from their garden, classical music playing softly in the background, but I felt like a stranger at my own family's table. You look thin, my mother observed as she served the roast chicken. Are you eating properly? I'm eating, I said, though it was true that food had lost most of its appeal since Derek left. Maybe you should come stay with us for a while, she suggested, just until you get back on your feet. The phrase back on your feet rankled me. I wasn't financially unstable or unable to care for myself. I was heartbroken, which was an entirely different thing. I'm fine in my apartment, Mom. I just need time to process everything. It's been almost a month, Carmen pointed out. She'd joined us for dinner, along with her husband Brad, who spent most meals checking his phone and contributing nothing to conversations. At some point, you have to accept that it's over and move forward. A month, I repeated. You think a month is too long to grieve the end of a 5-year relationship? I think wallowing doesn't help anyone, she said crisply. You're young, you're attractive, you have your whole life ahead of you. This is just a setback, not a tragedy. My father nodded in agreement. Carmen's right. The best thing you can do is focus on building a stable future for yourself. Maybe consider what we talked about regarding more traditional employment. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA and realized that none of them understood me at all. They saw my grief as weakness, my career as a phase, my heartbreak as inconvenience that should be resolved as quickly as possible. What if I don't want traditional employment? I asked. What if I'm happy with the life I've built for myself? Happy? Carmen laughed. You just got dumped and you're sitting here crying into Mom's pot roast. How is that happy? The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. I'm grieving the end of a relationship that meant everything to me. That doesn't mean my entire life is wrong. Nobody said your life is wrong, my mother interjected, but her tone suggested she thought exactly that. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me, I said slowly, would be having a family that supports my choices and comforts me when I'm hurting, instead of treating my pain like a character flaw that needs to be fixed. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. I could see my family exchanging glances, the kind of looks that said they thought I was being oversensitive and dramatic. We are supporting you, my father said finally. We're trying to help you see the bigger picture instead of getting stuck in negative emotions. But their version of support felt like erasure. They wanted me to stop feeling what I was feeling, to pretend that losing Derek didn't matter, to accept their judgment that my life choices were questionable and needed correction. They couldn't sit with my pain or acknowledge that their daughter was strong enough to handle heartbreak without needing to be fixed or rescued. As I drove home that night, I realized that this pattern wasn't new. Throughout my childhood and adult life, my family had consistently responded to my struggles by suggesting that I change my approach rather than offering comfort or validation. When I was bullied in middle school, they told me to try harder to fit in. When I struggled with anxiety in college, they suggested I was overthinking things. When I chose to freelance instead of pursuing traditional employment, they treated it as a temporary rebellion rather than a legitimate career path. Now, in the biggest crisis of my adult life, they were doing the same thing, suggesting that my pain was evidence of poor choices rather than a natural response to loss. But I was about to learn that my family's conditional support was nothing compared to what Derek's family would reveal about their true priorities. The call came on a Tuesday evening in December, exactly 6 weeks after Derek had moved out. Aria, it's Susan. Derek's mother's voice on my phone was so unexpected that for a moment I wondered if something terrible had happened to him. Hi Susan, I managed, my heart racing. I hope you don't mind me calling. Derek gave me your number a while ago, and I've been thinking about you since he told us about the situation. The way she referred to our breakup as the situation made it sound like a diplomatic crisis rather than the end of a relationship. I appreciate you reaching out, I said carefully. Well, I wanted to talk to you about something. Derek mentioned that you might be struggling financially now that you're on your own, and Richard and I have been talking about how we might be able to help. I felt my stomach clench. I wasn't struggling financially, and the fact that Derek had given his parents that impression was both insulting and infuriating. Actually, I'm doing fine financially, I said firmly. My business is stable and I can afford my apartment on my own. Oh, she sounded surprised. Well, that's wonderful, but we still wanted to offer our assistance. We know how difficult transitions can be, and we've always cared about you. Oh, there was something in her tone that made me suspicious. Derek's parents had always been polite to me, but we'd never been particularly close. They were wealthy, conservative people who seemed to view Derek's choice to live with me unmarried as a regrettable phase he'd eventually outgrow. What kind of assistance? I asked. Well, we're looking for someone to help manage our household. Light cleaning, organizing, some meal preparation, nothing too demanding. The pay would be quite good, and it might be a nice way for you to supplement your income while you figure out your next steps. Well, the words hit me like ice water. Derek's mother was offering me a job as their housekeeper. The woman who had once awkwardly asked me when Derek and I were planning to make things official now wanted to hire me to clean her toilets. I'm sorry, I said slowly, are you offering me a job as your domestic help? We just thought it might be mutually beneficial. You could use the extra income, and we could use reliable help around the house. The fact that she thought I needed their charity was humiliating enough, but the timing made it clear that this was about power and positioning. They wanted to establish a new dynamic where I was their employee rather than their son's girlfriend who might become their daughter-in-law. I appreciate the offer, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger, but I don't need a housekeeping job. My career is going well, and I have no interest in working for Derek's family. Of course, she said, but I could hear the disapproval in her voice. I just thought it might be nice to maintain some connection while you both figure things out. What you can expand for? There it was. The assumption that Derek and I were just taking a temporary break rather than truly broken up. They still saw me as someone hanging around the periphery of their son's life, waiting for him to decide if he wanted me back. There's nothing to figure out, I said clearly. Derek ended our relationship. I'm moving forward with my life, which doesn't include cleaning your house. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. The audacity of Derek's mother calling to offer me menial work while framing it as charity was breathtaking. But what made it worse was the realization that Derek had clearly told his parents I was struggling financially, painting me as someone who needed rescuing rather than someone who was successfully managing her own life. This conversation crystallized something important for me. The people I'd thought would support me during this difficult time were instead treating my crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate their superiority and offer unwanted fixes to problems I didn't have. My family wanted to change my career and lifestyle, while Derek's family wanted to turn me into their employee. None of them were seeing me as I actually was, a successful independent woman who was grieving the loss of an important relationship but was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. Instead, they saw someone whose life had fallen apart and who needed guidance, correction, or charity to get back on track. But the universe wasn't done teaching me lessons about people's true priorities. The real shock was still coming, and it would arrive in the form of Derek's new girlfriend applying for the exact job his mother had offered me. The humiliation in Target happened on a gray January afternoon when I was trying to accomplish the simple task of buying groceries. I'd finally reached a point where I could go about my daily life without constantly thinking about Derek, where I could walk through our old neighborhood without feeling like I was going to cry. I was actually feeling proud of myself for how well I was handling everything, for building a life that felt stable and hopeful again. I was reaching for a box of cereal, the same brand Derek and I used to share for lazy Sunday breakfasts, when I heard a familiar laugh behind me. My heart dropped before I even turned around, because I knew that laugh. It was Derek's laugh, the same warm sound that used to make me feel so loved and secure. He was standing at the end of the aisle with a woman I'd never seen before. She was petite and blonde, wearing expensive-looking workout clothes and carrying a designer purse that probably cost more than I made in a month. She had her hand on Derek's arm in a way that was clearly possessive, and he was looking at her with the same adoring expression he used to give me. I tried to duck behind the cereal display, hoping to avoid a confrontation, but Derek spotted me before I could escape. "Aria," he said, his smile fading. Hi, I managed, clutching my shopping basket like a shield. The blonde woman looked between us with obvious curiosity, and I could see Derek debating whether to introduce us. Finally, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Chloe, this is Aria. Aria, this is Chloe." Chloe's perfectly glossed lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked me up and down in a way that made me suddenly aware of my worn jeans, old sweater, and the fact that I hadn't bothered with makeup for a grocery run. "Oh," she said, her voice bright and fake. "The ex-girlfriend." The way she said it made it sound like I was a curiosity in a museum, something to be observed and dismissed. "Nice to meet you," I said politely, though it wasn't nice at all. "Derek's told me so much about you," Chloe continued, still smiling that sharp smile. "It's so brave of you trying to make it as an artist. Most people eventually realize they need something more stable, but I admire people who keep chasing their dreams even when it's not practical." Waddle Pasha Morfires were carefully chosen to sound supportive while actually being condescending. She was letting me know that Derek had told her about my career, and that they'd discussed my choices in terms that painted me as naive and impractical. Waddle Pasha Morfires were older. 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 And Shara's. Derek looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but he wasn't stepping in to correct her dismissive tone or defend my career. Waddle Pasha Morfires were older. Waddle Pasha Morfires were older. And Shara's were into moin kanzatka calm. Mezzaline to sand. Waddle Pasha Morfires were older. 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 Waddle Pasha. I know artists sometimes struggle financially, and I might have some opportunities that could help. I felt my face burn with humiliation. What kind of opportunities? Well, I manage several properties for my family's real estate company, and we're always looking for reliable people to help with maintenance and cleaning. It's good steady work and the pay is actually quite decent. She was offering me a cleaning job. In the middle of Target, in front of my ex-boyfriend, this woman I'd just met was suggesting I was so unsuccessful that I needed to supplement my income by scrubbing other people's houses. "That's very kind," I said through gritted teeth, "but I'm not looking for cleaning work." "Oh, of course not," she said quickly. "I just meant that sometimes we all need to be practical about making ends meet. There's no shame in taking work that pays the bills while you pursue your passions." The words "no shame" made it clear that she thought there absolutely was shame in the kind of work she was offering, which made her offer even more insulting. "With there some adulman I kemerks and nitty d love you rebel sabasprox that you heard," I said firmly. "That's wonderful," Chloe said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe me. "Well, if you ever change your mind, Derek has my number. I'm sure he'd be happy to pass along my contact information." Derek nodded uncomfortably, clearly wanting this conversation to end. "It was nice meeting you," Chloe added, then turned to Derek. "Ready, babe?" As they walked away, I heard her voice carry back to me, "God, Derek, you weren't kidding when you said she was a broke loser." I almost felt sorry for her. The words hit me like a physical blow. Derek had called me a broke loser. The man I'd loved for 5 years, who had shared my bed and my dreams and my daily life, had described me to his new girlfriend as a broke loser. I stood there in the cereal aisle shaking with humiliation and rage as other shoppers moved around me. The woman Derek was dating had just offered me a cleaning job after insulting my career and my financial situation, and Derek had stood there and let it happen. Worse, he had apparently set up this dynamic by telling her I was unsuccessful and struggling. But what I didn't know as I stood there trying not to cry over boxes of cornflakes was that this humiliating encounter was about to get infinitely more bizarre. Because 3 weeks later I would receive an email that would make me question everything I thought I knew about irony, audacity, and the universe's sense of humor. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was working on a website redesign for a local nonprofit. I was in a good headspace, focused on work that felt meaningful, when I saw the subject line, "Household Management Position, Excellent Opportunity." I almost deleted it immediately, assuming it was spam, but something made me open it. "Dear Missile, I hope this email finds you well. I received your contact information through a mutual acquaintance who suggested you might be interested in a household management position. I am seeking a reliable, detail-oriented individual to assist with various domestic responsibilities at my home. Light housekeeping and organization, meal preparation and kitchen maintenance, managing household schedules and appointments, occasional assistance with social events and entertaining. The compensation is $25 per hour for approximately 20 hours per week, with the possibility of additional hours during busy periods. I am looking for someone who is professional, discreet, and able to maintain high standards. If you are interested in discussing this opportunity further, please respond with your availability for an interview. I read the email 3 times before the full absurdity of the situation hit me. Chloe Patterson, Derek's new girlfriend who had insulted me in Target and called me a broke loser, was asking me to work as her housekeeper. The same woman who had talked about my career like it was a cute hobby was now trying to hire me to clean her house and cook her meals. The audacity was breathtaking. After humiliating me in public and making it clear that she saw me as beneath her, she was now expecting me to apply for a job that would put me in the position of serving her. The woman who was sleeping with my ex-boyfriend wanted to pay me to clean her toilets. I stared at the email, feeling a mixture of rage and dark amusement. Part of me wanted to respond immediately with exactly what I thought of her and her job offer. But another part of me was curious about what kind of person had such a complete lack of self-awareness that they would reach out to someone they'd just insulted and expect them to be grateful for the opportunity to work as their domestic help. The phrase mutual acquaintance particularly galled me. Was Derek the mutual acquaintance? Had he actually given his new girlfriend my contact information so she could offer me a job? The thought that he might be involved in this humiliation made me feel sick. I called Maya immediately. "You're not gonna believe this," I said when she answered. "Try me. After the year you've had, I'm prepared for anything." I read her the email word for word. The silence on the other end stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Maya, are you there?" "I'm here," she said slowly. "I'm just trying to process the sheer fucking audacity of this woman. Right? I mean, what kind of person does this? The kind of person who thinks you should be grateful for the opportunity to serve her," Maya said, her voice tight with anger. "This is about power, Arya. She wants to put you in a position where you're literally cleaning up after her." Maya, do you think Derek is involved? Do you think he gave her my email address? I don't know, but honestly, does it matter? If he didn't actively participate, he at least didn't stop her from doing this. And remember, he's the one who told her you were a broke loser in the first place. Maya was right. Whether Derek had actively helped Chloe find my contact information or just passively allowed her to pursue this insulting scheme, he was complicit in the humiliation. "What should I do?" I asked. "What do you want to do?" I asked, "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wants to tell her exactly what I think of her and her job offer. But part of me is curious about what would happen if I actually responded. "You're not seriously considering taking the job?" "God, no. But I'm wondering if there's a way to turn this around on her. She clearly thinks I'm desperate enough to work for her. What if I let her think that for a while?" "I like where this is going," Maya said. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet, but this woman has gone out of her way to humiliate me twice now. Maybe it's time she learned that underestimating people can backfire." I spent the rest of the day thinking about how to respond. I could simply ignore the email, but that felt like letting Chloe win. I could send an angry response, but that would probably just confirm her opinion that I was unstable and desperate. Or I could play along and see where her arrogance led her. My evening, I'd decided on my strategy. Dear Miss Wabsoption Filebong, Dear Miss Wabsoption Filebong Cow, where chwana betting that way will please say. Thank you for reaching out about the household management position. I am indeed interested in learning more about this opportunity. I have experience with all of the responsibilities you mentioned, and I pride myself on maintaining high standards and attention to detail. I am available for an interview at your convenience. I'll look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to hearing from you. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Would you be available for an interview this Thursday at 2 p.m.? I can send you the address. I should mention that this is a live-in position. I have a guest suite that comes with the job, which might be helpful given your current situation. We can discuss all the details when we meet. I'll look forward to Siju Kashri. I have some work a live-in position. She wanted me to move into her house and work as her live-in housekeeper. The woman who was dating my ex-boyfriend wanted me to live in her guest room and clean her house while she and Derek presumably carried on their relationship in the master bedroom. The situation was so outrageous that I actually started laughing. Chloe's complete lack of awareness about how inappropriate this was would have been funny if it weren't so insulting. Did she really think I was so desperate that I would agree to live in her house and serve her meals while she dated the man I'd been planning to marry? But her assumption that I was in some kind of dire situation that would make this arrangement appealing also told me something important. Derek had painted a picture of me as someone whose life had fallen apart after he left, someone who was struggling and might need rescue. The fact that Chloe thought offering me room and board was a selling point meant she believed I couldn't afford my own housing. I forwarded the email to Maya with a message. It gets worse. Her response was immediate. This woman is either completely delusional or deliberately cruel. Either way, she's underestimated you badly. I agreed to the interview partly out of curiosity and partly because I was starting to form a plan. Chloe had made two critical errors. She'd assumed I was desperate and she'd assumed I was powerless. I was about to show her how wrong she was on both counts. The interview was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m., which gave me 3 days to prepare. I spent that time doing research on Chloe Patterson and her family's real estate business, gathering information that would prove very useful for what I had in mind. What Chloe didn't know was that I'd spent 5 years building a successful business, which meant I'd developed excellent research skills, professional networks, and a solid understanding of how to protect myself legally. She'd also made the mistake of underestimating someone who had nothing left to lose and a very strong motivation to prove her wrong. The address she sent me was in the most expensive part of town, a neighborhood where houses started at $2 million and went up from there. As I drove through the perfectly manicured streets lined with massive homes, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation about what was going to happen next. I was about to walk into the lion's den, but I wasn't going as prey. Chloe's house was a sprawling contemporary monstrosity that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought bigger automatically meant better. The front yard was perfectly landscaped with plants that probably cost more than most people's cars, and the circular driveway could have accommodated a small wedding reception. I rang the doorbell at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a folder with fake references and a resume I'd crafted specifically for this meeting. When Chloe opened the door, she was wearing what looked like designer athleisure wear that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Aria," she said with that same fake smile I remembered from Target. Come in, come in." The interior of the house was exactly what I'd expected, all white marble and crystal fixtures, with furniture that looked expensive but sterile. Everything was perfectly arranged, like a showroom that nobody actually lived in. "What a beautiful home," I said, playing the role of impressed potential employee. "Thank you. My family's in real estate development, so I grew up appreciating good design." She led me through a living room that could have housed a small family toward what appeared to be a formal dining room. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be great." As she bustled around getting my water, I took the opportunity to observe the space more carefully. Despite the expensive furnishings, there were signs that this wasn't really Chloe's primary residence. No personal photos, no books or magazines lying around, nothing that suggested someone actually lived here day to day. "So," she said, settling across from me at the massive dining table, "tell me about your experience with household management." I'd prepared for this question carefully. "I've been managing my own household for years, of course, and I've helped several friends with organizing and event planning. I'm very detail-oriented and I understand the importance of maintaining privacy and discretion." "That's wonderful. And you mentioned in your email that you have experience with all the responsibilities I listed?" "Yes, I enjoy cooking and I'm comfortable with all types of cleaning and organizing. I also have experience coordinating schedules and managing multiple priorities." This was all technically true. Running my own business and maintaining my own home had given me all these skills, but I was deliberately making it sound like I'd used them in a domestic service context. "Excellent," Chloe said, making notes on a legal pad. "Now I should be upfront about the living situation. This would be a live-in position with your own private suite including a bedroom, bathroom, and small sitting area. Meals would be provided, of course, along with your salary." "That sounds very generous," I said, trying to look grateful rather than horrified. "I'm glad you think so. I know that flexibility with living arrangements can be really helpful, especially when someone is going through a difficult transition." There it was, the assumption that I was in crisis and needed saving. Chloe saw offering me room and board as charity, proof of her own generosity rather than the insulting proposition it actually was. "I do appreciate that consideration," I said carefully. "I'm curious," she continued, "how did you hear about this position? You mentioned a mutual acquaintance." This was the question I'd been waiting for. "Actually, I think there might have been some miscommunication about that. I received your email through my business contact information, but I'm not sure who referred me." I watched her face carefully as she processed this information. For just a moment, her composed expression flickered, and I saw a flash of something that might have been uncertainty. "Oh," she said, "well, regardless of how we connected, I'm glad we're talking." But her confidence seemed slightly shaken, and I could see her trying to figure out how I'd ended up on her radar if she hadn't actively sought me out. The truth, I suspected, was that Derek had given her my information after their conversation in Target, but she didn't want to admit his involvement. "Can you tell me more about your expectations for the role?" I asked. "For instance, would there be specific hours, or would it be more flexible?" "I'm looking for someone who can be available when needed," she said, Generally, I'd expect you to be present during the day for regular household tasks, but there might be occasions when I need assistance in the evenings for entertaining or special events. That makes sense. And you mentioned the possibility of additional hours during busy periods. Yes, I host quite a bit. Dinner parties, charity events, that sort of thing. During those times, I'd need extra help with preparation and cleanup. As she talked about her social calendar and entertaining needs, I started to understand the real purpose of this position. Chloe didn't just want a housekeeper, she wanted someone to facilitate her lifestyle as a wealthy socialite. She wanted someone to make her look effortlessly sophisticated by handling all the behind-the-scenes work that went into maintaining her image. That sounds like important work, I said. I imagine maintaining the kind of standards you're used to requires a lot of attention to detail. Exactly, she said, warming to the topic. I've had household help before, but it's been difficult to find someone who really understands what I need. A lot of people don't appreciate that managing a home like this is really quite complex. Our casual reference to having had household help before revealed a lot about how she saw these relationships. To Chloe, domestic workers weren't individuals with their own lives and priorities. They were interchangeable resources whose job was to make her life easier. I can imagine, I said, and I assume discretion is important given your social position. Absolutely. I value my privacy very highly, and I need to know that anyone working in my home understands the importance of confidentiality. This was rich, coming from someone who had loudly called me a broke loser in the middle of Target, but I just nodded seriously. Of course, privacy and professionalism are essential. We talked for another 20 minutes about schedules, responsibilities, and logistics. Chloe was clearly enjoying the role of generous benefactor, explaining how she'd make sure I was comfortable and well taken care of. She seemed to think she was offering me a lifeline, a chance to stabilize my apparently chaotic life by serving her needs. I think this could work out very well, she said finally. When would you be available to start? I'd need to give proper notice to my current clients, I said, maintaining the fiction that I was actually considering this job. Perhaps in 2 weeks? That should work. I'll have my assistant draw up a contract with all the details we discussed. As she walked me to the door, Chloe's demeanor was that of someone who had just solved a problem very neatly. She'd found domestic help, demonstrated her generosity by offering housing to someone in need, and positioned herself as the sophisticated woman who could afford to employ her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. I'm really looking forward to working together, she said as I reached my car. Thank you so much for this opportunity, I replied, playing my role to the end. As I drove away from her palatial house, I felt a mixture of disgust and anticipation. Chloe's arrogance and complete lack of self-awareness had given me everything I needed to turn this situation to my advantage. She thought she was hiring a desperate woman who would be grateful for the chance to serve her. Instead, she just invited someone with 5 years of business experience, strong professional networks, and absolutely nothing left to lose to get a front-row seat to her life. But what happened next would be entirely up to me. I could back out gracefully and let Chloe think I'd changed my mind. Or I could move forward with a plan that would teach her exactly what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. That evening, I called Maya to debrief. How did it go? She asked immediately. She offered me the job, a live-in position at $25 an hour, with room and board included because she thinks I can't afford my own place. Jesus Christ, this woman really has no limits. The best part is that she kept talking about how generous she was being, how she understood that I was going through a difficult transition and needed stability. So what are you going to do? I'd been thinking about that question all afternoon. I'm going to take the job, Maya, but not for the reasons she thinks. Arya, I love you, but this sounds like a terrible idea. Hear me out, I said. This woman has gone out of her way to humiliate me twice. She called me a broke loser, and then tried to hire me as her housekeeper. She thinks I'm desperate and powerless. You're not desperate and powerless. Exactly. But she doesn't know that. She thinks she's hiring someone who has no options and will be grateful to scrub her floors. What she's actually doing is giving me access to her home, her personal information, and her daily routine. What are you planning to do with that access? I don't know yet. But I know that someone who treats people the way Chloe has treated me probably has other things in her life that wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. And I know that people who underestimate others often make careless mistakes. This sounds like revenge. It's not revenge, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. It's justice. She created this situation by treating me like I was beneath her. I'm just going to show her what happens when you invite the wrong person into your life. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure about this? Because once you start, you can't undo it. I'm sure. Chloe Patterson thinks she knows exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. She's about to learn how wrong she is. The next morning, I sent Chloe an email accepting her job offer and confirming my start date in 2 weeks. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic, full of exclamation points and phrases about how exciting this was going to be. I spent those 2 weeks making careful preparations. I researched everything I could find about Chloe and her family's business, looking for any potential vulnerabilities or interesting connections. I also reached out to my professional network, letting certain people know that I was taking on a new project that might lead to some interesting opportunities. Most importantly, I prepared myself mentally for what I was about to do. Playing the role of grateful employee to someone who had humiliated me would require every acting skill I possessed, but I was motivated by something stronger than anger. I was motivated by the certainty that Chloe Patterson was about to learn that actions have consequences and that treating people badly often comes back to bite you in ways you never expected. 2 weeks later, I loaded my car with enough belongings to make it look like I was actually moving into Chloe's guest suite and drove back to her house. As I pulled into that circular driveway for the second time, I felt a surge of anticipation about what I was going to discover in the next few weeks. Chloe met me at the door with the same fake enthusiasm she'd shown during the interview. "Aria, welcome home." Home. The word made my skin crawl, but I smiled and thanked her for her hospitality. As she led me to what would theoretically be my living quarters, I looked around with new eyes, no longer seeing an impressive house, but rather a stage where I was about to give the performance of my lifetime. "I think you're going to be very happy here," Chloe said as she showed me around the guest suite. "I think you're right," I replied, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I meant it completely. What followed was 3 weeks of the most surreal experience of my life. Every morning I woke up in Chloe's guest room and played the role of grateful housekeeper while quietly documenting everything I observed about her life, her relationships, and her business dealings. Chloe treated me exactly as I'd expected, like a friendly but ultimately invisible presence whose job was to facilitate her lifestyle. She'd give me lists of tasks each morning, ranging from mundane cleaning to elaborate preparation for her social events. She'd chat at me while I worked, treating me like a combination of therapist and audience for her daily dramas. "Derek is being so sweet lately," she'd say while I organized her walk-in closet. "He brought me flowers yesterday just because I think he's finally realizing how lucky he is to have found someone who really understands him." These casual mentions of Derek were clearly designed to make me feel bad about what I'd lost, but instead they gave me valuable information about their relationship dynamics. From Chloe's own words, I learned that Derek was having trouble finding a new job, that he was staying at her house more and more frequently, and that they'd had several arguments about his lack of direction. "I keep telling him that he needs to think about his future more seriously," she confided one afternoon while I cleaned her kitchen. "I mean, I can't carry this relationship forever. I need a partner, not a project." The irony of Chloe complaining about Derek's lack of ambition while talking to the woman she'd called a broke loser was apparently lost on her. But I filed away every detail she shared, building a picture of a relationship that was already showing signs of strain. More interesting than her relationship troubles were the glimpses I got into her business activities. Chloe's family real estate company operated in some ethically questionable ways, including deliberately targeting elderly homeowners with aggressive buyout offers and flipping properties without disclosing serious structural problems to new buyers. I overheard phone conversations about pressuring tenants to move out of rent-controlled apartments and discussions about bribing city officials to fast-track permit approvals. But the real breakthrough came during my 3rd week, when Chloe asked me to help her prepare for a dinner party she was hosting for some business associates. As I arranged flowers and set up the dining room, I overheard a conversation between Chloe and her father about a property development deal that involved falsifying environmental impact reports. "The soil contamination isn't that bad," Chloe was saying into her phone, "and by the time anyone discovers it, we'll have already sold all the units." She was standing just around the corner from where I was working, apparently having forgotten that her housekeeper was within earshot. As she continued talking about covering up environmental hazards that could seriously affect the health of future residents, I quietly activated the voice recording app on my phone. "Just make sure the paperwork looks clean," she continued. "I don't want any complications when we go to market next month." Over the following days, I continued to document similar conversations and gather evidence of the Patterson family's business practices. I also discovered that Chloe had been systematically cheating on her taxes by claiming personal expenses as business deductions and hiding income in offshore accounts. But perhaps most importantly, I learned that Chloe's treatment of me wasn't unique. She'd burned through 6 different housekeepers in the past 2 years, each of whom she'd fired for increasingly petty reasons. She'd also been involved in several lawsuits with former employees who claimed she'd failed to pay wages or had created hostile working conditions. 3 weeks into my employment, I had enough information to seriously damage Chloe's reputation and her family's business, but I wanted to be strategic about how I used it. The goal wasn't just to hurt her back, It was to make sure she faced real consequences for her behavior and couldn't continue treating people badly without repercussions. The opportunity for my final move came when Chloe announced that she was hosting a major charity fundraiser at her house, an event that would be attended by city council members, local business leaders, and several journalists who covered society events. "This is going to be the social event of the season," she told me excitedly. "I need everything to be absolutely perfect." "Of course," I said, "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly." What Chloe didn't know was that I'd been planning my own event for that evening, one that would give her guests a very different kind of entertainment than what they were expecting. The night of the fundraiser, I executed my plan with the same attention to detail I'd once brought to designing marketing campaigns. As guests arrived and Chloe played the role of gracious hostess, I made sure that certain key attendees received copies of documents I'd carefully compiled over the past 3 weeks. The city council member who had been working with the Patterson family on zoning approvals was particularly interested to learn about their practice of bribing officials. The journalist from the Business Journal found the tax evasion evidence fascinating. The environmental lawyer who attended as someone's guest was very concerned about the contaminated soil cover-up. But the most satisfying moment came when Derek arrived as Chloe's date, clearly uncomfortable but trying to play the role of supportive boyfriend. When he saw me arranging canapes in the kitchen, his face went white. "Aria, what are you doing here?" "Oh, cute," I said simply. "I'm Chloe's housekeeper." The shock and horror on his face told me everything I needed to know about his involvement in this situation. He had given Chloe my contact information, probably after complaining about how I was struggling financially, but he'd never expected me to actually take the job. "You can't be serious," he said. "Very serious, although I should probably mention that tonight is my last night. I'll be giving my notice shortly." Before he could respond, Chloe appeared in the kitchen, irritated to find her boyfriend talking to the help. "Derek, what are you doing back here? Our guests are asking about you." "Chloe," he said slowly, "we need to talk." "Not now," she said dismissively. "Aria, we need more champagne in the living room." As I carried the champagne tray into the main party, I could hear Derek trying to explain to Chloe why having me work for her was a bad idea. But it was too late. The evening's real entertainment was just beginning. By 10 p.m., 3 different government agencies had received anonymous tips about the Patterson family's business practices. By 11 p.m., 2 journalists were making phone calls to their editors about a story that could break as early as the next morning. By midnight, Chloe's perfect fundraiser had devolved into clusters of guests whispering about contaminated soil and tax evasion while she frantically tried to figure out what had gone wrong. I slipped away during the chaos, leaving my resignation letter on Chloe's kitchen counter along with my uniform and the keys to her house. "Thank you for the opportunity to work in your home. Unfortunately, this position is no longer a good fit for my career goals. Please consider this my formal resignation, effective immediately. I've left my uniform and keys on the counter. You can mail my final paycheck to my permanent address. P.S. You might want to consider being more careful about who you invite into your home. You never know what they might discover." As I drove away from Chloe's house for the last time, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and closure. I'd spent 3 weeks being treated like an invisible servant by a woman who thought she was superior to me in every way, but in the end, her arrogance and lack of respect for other people had been her downfall. The story broke in the local Business Journal 3 days later, with follow-up coverage in the main newspaper and on local television news. The Patterson family's real estate company was hit with multiple investigations. Chloe personally faced charges for tax evasion, and several of their development projects were shut down pending environmental reviews. Derek called me 2 weeks later, his voice strained and angry. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I worked as a housekeeper for 3 weeks," I said calmly. "It was very educational. Chloe's life is falling apart. Her family's business is under investigation. She might go to jail." "That's terrible," I said, though I didn't sound particularly sympathetic. "It's almost like actions have consequences. This is because of what happened at Target, isn't it? Because of what she said about you? This is because Chloe Patterson thought she could treat people badly without repercussions. She was wrong. So you destroyed her life for revenge." "I didn't destroy anything," I said firmly. "I documented illegal activities and made sure the appropriate authorities were informed. If Chloe's life is falling apart, it's because she built it on a foundation of lies and exploitation." Derek was quiet for a long moment. "I never meant for any of this to happen. What exactly did you mean to happen when you told your new girlfriend I was a broke loser? What did you think would happen when you gave her my contact information so she could offer me a job cleaning her house?" "I didn't give her your information," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Derek, I said softly. We both know that's not true. But honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. You chose to be with someone who treats people cruelly, and now you get to deal with the consequences of that choice. After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of humiliation and anger that I'd been carrying since Derek left was finally gone, replaced by a quiet confidence in my own worth and capabilities. 6 months later, I received an email from a woman named Jennifer who had been one of Chloe's previous housekeepers. She'd read about the investigation in the news and wanted to thank me for exposing the truth about the Patterson family's business practices. I always knew something wasn't right about that family, she wrote. But I needed the job, and I was afraid no one would believe me if I spoke up. What you did took courage, and it's going to help a lot of people. That email reminded me that my actions hadn't just been about personal vindication. They'd been about holding people accountable for harmful behavior and protecting others from being victimized in the future. Maya and I celebrated the 1-year anniversary of Derek's departure by going to the same Target where Chloe had first insulted me. As we walked down the cereal aisle, Maya pointed to the spot where the confrontation had happened. "Bye, sides gang. This is where it all started," she said. "No," I corrected her. "This is where I started fighting back." Looking back now, I can see that the whole experience taught me something crucial about my own strength and value. For years, I'd allowed other people, my family, Derek, his family, to define my worth based on their own limited understanding of success and happiness. I'd accepted their judgment that my choices were questionable and their treatment of me was reasonable. But Chloe Patterson's breathtaking arrogance had pushed me past the point where I was willing to accept other people's low opinions of me. When she called me a broke loser and then tried to hire me as her housekeeper, she'd crossed a line that forced me to defend myself in a way I'd never done before. The experience taught me that people who consistently treat others badly usually have something to hide. They rely on their victims being too intimidated, too polite, or too powerless to fight back. Chloe had counted on me being grateful for her charity and too afraid of losing the job to cause any trouble. Instead, she'd given access to her life to someone who had nothing left to lose and every reason to pay attention to what she was really doing. Her assumption that I was desperate and powerless had blinded her to the possibility that I might be dangerous. But more than anything, the experience taught me to trust my own perceptions and stand up for my own worth. For too long, I'd accepted other people's assessments of my life and choices, even when those assessments were clearly biased or unfair. I'd let Derek's family treat me like charity case, let my own family dismiss my career and my pain, let Derek himself rewrite our history to make me seem like the unstable one. The moment I decided to take Chloe's job offer was the moment I stopped accepting other people's versions of who I was and started asserting my own power. It wasn't about revenge, it was about refusing to be invisible, refusing to be dismissed, and refusing to let someone's cruelty go unchallenged. If you've ever felt like people underestimate you, like they think they know who you are based on limited information or their own prejudices, I want you to know that you have more power than you realize. People who treat others badly often do so because they assume their victims won't fight back. They count on your politeness, your fear, your desire to keep the peace. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be what other people expect you to be. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is to show people exactly what you're capable of when they push you too far. Watch out for people who treat service workers badly, who make assumptions about others based on their financial situation or career choices, who think their money or status gives them the right to be cruel. These people usually have something to hide, and they often make the mistake of assuming that everyone else is as willing to compromise their integrity as they are. Don't let anyone make you feel small or powerless. Don't accept other people's judgments about your worth or your choices. And definitely don't let anyone convince you that their mistreatment of you is somehow for your own good. Trust your instincts, document everything, and remember that people who underestimate you are often giving you the most powerful weapon you could ask for, their own carelessness and arrogance. If you're watching this from a place where someone has made you feel invisible or worthless, please know that you matter more than they want you to believe. Your voice has power, your choices have value, and your response to their treatment of you can change everything. Sometimes the universe does have a sense of humor, but more often than not, justice comes from people who refuse to accept injustice and do something about it. Subscribe if this story resonated with you, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had someone completely underestimate who you were and what you were capable of? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories of standing up for yourself and proving people wrong. Remember, you're stronger than you think, smarter than they believe, and more powerful than anyone who tries to make you feel small. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.